technical seminars are an Intertech production. For instructor-led .NET, Java, and XML courses, visit us at www.intertech.com.
If I want to pass in some dynamic information, I use the format that you're seeing here on slide 30, which is a curly brace format. So my first parameter that I'll pass in will be curly brace 0. Second one will be curly brace 1. Third one would be curly brace 2, and so on. So it's a 0 indexed parameter, and all you have to do is use that curly brace notation, and it'll know once it does the lookup of that property that it will swap it out at runtime. Sometimes I want to do a little bit more than just pass in a parameter. I want it to do some formatting as well. And so there are some formatting hints that we can provide depending on what kind of object we supply. So in this case, you'll see that my second parameter, denoted as curly brace 1, is a date, and I'm going to want to format it as a long format. We'll take a look at the different kind of formats that are available, but just note that this is just a way of passing in an object and then having it do some formatting after the fact. So here I've created my English and French. Here are some of the parameters that are possible depending on the kind of object. So if it's a date or time, I can use short, medium, long, full, or pattern. If you look below that, you'll see some examples of what that would look like, the different formats in English. Really, what it means to be short, medium, long, or full, that's going to depend on the region, what's actually displayed for the date. But it is possible to be from the least verbose to the most verbose. With numbers, there are also formatting parameters such as integer, currency, percent, and pattern. So how do we pass in the parameters once we've defined them inside of our property file? That's pretty easy too. What we're going to use is an object called a message format object that will allow us to pass in those parameters. So here everything starts off as the same as it did before. I'm able to create my locale. I grab a hold of my resource bundle, passing in the base bundle name and my locale object. And now I create an array of objects that'll be my parameters. So my first parameter is a string JSON. Second one is going to be a date object. You'll notice the type of this array is object, so I'm able to pass in really any kind of object I want to. Next, I'll use the message format object to actually apply this locale, passing the parameters and getting our message to print out as we expect. So you create a new message format object. I'm just configuring it with an empty string. I set my locale. I apply a pattern on it, so I grab my string, the username, and then I format it using that formatter and pass in that object array of params. Once it does that, it will swap out those curly brace 0, curly brace 1 with the appropriate information. So let's take a look at some code to see how that looks. Alright, so here's the code that's actually going to create those objects and put them inside of an array, and using the message format class to actually format the message after we retrieve the string. So I'll run this first in English. Let's start off with in French. So I pass in the locale French, and you can see that it passed in the username first, JSON, and then next it printed out the date in a French format. If I pass in English, you see now that the JSON was placed a little bit farther. First we have the word username, and then we put in the parameter JSON, and then the date is formatted in an English way. So you can see that it allows us to pass in parameters and also choose their placement and optionally the format of those parameters as well. The third and final type of resource bundle that we're going to look at is known as a list resource bundle. A list resource bundle will return really any kind of an object that we want. So when we create a list resource bundle, this is where usually you'll store your images that need to be localized or other kind of objects. you need to override one method, and that is the getContents method. And that's going to be a two-dimensional array, and the array looks as you see in our examples here on slide 33. So English, I've got a key and then an actual object. In this case, I'm essentially swapping out a flag and a map depending on what region the user is coming from. The key is going to be the same. The country flag, the country map, those will be the same. It's just going to delegate that lookup at runtime. So again, it's a two-dimensional array of objects. The first parameter will be the key, and then the second will be the object itself. The getContents method will simply return that multi-dimensional array. And then when I want to use it, I use a resource bundle, get bundle, as I did before. The only difference now, which we didn't have to do when we used the regular classes or the property resource bundles, is that I'll need to cast what is returned to me as a list resource bundle. And once I have that, then I use a method called getObject. And from there, I can pass in the key and cast it to be whatever object it really was. In this case, it happens to be an image. So the usage of our resource bundles is more or less the same. A little variation with the list resource bundle, but extremely easy after we've created our resource bundles to be able to decide at runtime what content should be selected. So, on the topic of selection, how is a resource bundle selected? First, what happens is the submitted locale is inspected and a resource bundle with that specific locale is searched for. Now, I should say that there's often some concerns about performance. If we're using property files, is it going to go looking on the file system and then loading it in, and every time we look up a key, go back to the file system, try to find it? No, it doesn't do that. It loads it at one time, and once it's been loaded, just like a class, it'll be in memory and execute fairly fast. But what happens once that process has taken place is it will look for that particular base name and locale that you've entered, and we'll try to find it. If it finds it, great. That's the resource bundle it will use. If it doesn't find it, then it will try to find one with a less specific locale. So for example, if the locale object that I passed in contained a variant, then it'll look for a resource bundle with the base name, language, and country. It'll drop the variant. If it still doesn't find something, then it'll try to find something with a base name and just the language that you passed in. And if nothing still, then it's going to look at the default locale of the system. So far we've talked about how to create a locale. We need to differentiate now that there's really two different places that locales can be stored. And actually, you could store locales in many places. But as far as the Java APIs are concerned, it's really looking for two different kinds of locales. The one that you submit into the method, or else the default locale that's already configured for the system. So if the one that we submitted, if the locale object that we submitted isn't able to produce anything, just can't find anything with that base name and that particular locale, then what it does is it looks and says, okay, what's the default locale of the system? And it goes through this whole process again. So it will look for the if the default locale of the system has a language, a country, and a variant, it'll try to find that with the base name. If it can't find that, then it'll try to find one with the language and country of the default locale. If that's still not found, it drops the country and looks one for the language. If nothing is found after all of this is done, then it just looks for a simple resource bundle with nothing but the base name. So this is a good best practice that you should take care of when you are internationalizing your application, is not only create resource bundles with English and French and whatever language and region that you want to support, but also create a resource bundle that's just the base name dot properties if you're doing a property resource bundle, for example. And the reason is that if nothing is found, it will at least locate that particular resource bundle and display something. If nothing is found, then an exception is thrown, and that's a missing resource exception.
For more free learning resources and to see the latest lineup of our instructor-led .NET, Java, and XML courses, visit us at www.intertech.com.